off on page Tes, at the bottom of the page, line 21, and we were speaking about the Yira Tata of Elul bring a preparation for the Yira Ilah of Rosh Hashanah. So the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it brings about Yira. It says, "I talk a shofar be'ir v'am lo yachrodu." If the person will blow, if a shofar will be blown in the city, will a nation not be trembling and so on? So there's the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah brings about Yira, and in a similar vein, the blowing of the shofar in Elul also brings about Yira. Except the difference is that the shofar in Elul is Yirat Hatah, the lower level of awe of Hashem, Kabbalah's oil, just being a servant, it's coming from me, Ani לדודי, I am reaching out to Hashem. Then there's the Yirei Ilah that comes from above. That is on Rosh Hashanah because we're in the presence, we're in the Heichel Malchusei of Hashem, and that's why we have the Yira in Rosh Hashanah from the blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Now, we asked in yesterday's shir, we asked why is it necessary as a precursor, as an introduction, as a preface to the blowing of the shofar Rosh Hashanah. We need to have the blowing of the shofar in El. Seemingly, isn't it enough that we have the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? That's going to bring us to the Charada. That's going to bring us to the level of the great bittul, and we said the reason why we need to have that great bittul on Rosh Hashanah is because since on Rosh Hashanah it's drawing down the level of makif, and makif, the highest level of makif, can only be drawn down through bittul, like it says, Eza bayis, the level of makif can only come down through al-aniv and chei ruach, through the level of someone that has bittul. But if so, it's only brought down through bittul. Why is there a need to have the blowing of the shofar in El as well? It's enough. We have the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah itself. So he went into explaining also the difference between what brings about the Yira, how does the Yira Ilah come about on Rosh Hashanah? How does the Yira Tata come about in El? Yira Ilah is a level of Yiras HaRoimimus, where in awe of the level of the Hashem's greatness that transcends the worlds, beyond the worlds. Yira Tata is about Hashem's greatness within the worlds. Therefore, Hashem's power and might in the worlds, that brings us to a level of only Bittul Hayesh, the lower level of Yira. And the higher level of Yira is the level of something that's above him. It's out of his capability. Because a person has the capability of comprehending and reaching the level of understanding the godliness that has to do with the world. So therefore, it's something that's coming from him. As opposed to the revelation of Yira Ilah, that's something that comes not because of him. It's something that has to come from above that helps the idea of Torah mitzvahs. When we do mitzvahs, so we have the idea of Vaytzavenu Hashem es chukim ha'ela le'yira oisai. Last is called chukim ha'ela le'yiras Hashem. That how do we reach the higher level of yira, the yira es Hashem, the yiras haroimimus? That's through the mitzvahs, and that's why when the king is in the field over there, it's not felt so much his exaltedness because the king is like in an ordinary way in the field. When the king is in his royal chambers, when he's in his royal palace over there, we feel, and over there it's the revelation of this high level. Just like on Rosh Hashanah, when the king is in his palace, it's revealed this great level. So now we're going to learn inside, again, page Tes, line 21. The fact that we need to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah to be able to come to the higher level of Yidam, though at the time of Rosh Hashanah, there's already the revelation of the Eibishter's kingship. If there's already the revelation of the Eibishter's kingship, why do we need to have the blowing of the shofar? Beforehand, we said that there's the blowing of the shofar in Elul that awakens the Yira Tata, and there's the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah to awaken the Yira Ilah. But we said the very time of Rosh Hashanah is a time when the Eibishter is Bizgal's Malchusay. Since there's the revelation of his kingship, that itself, like entering the king's chambers, that itself, you see the king in all of his glory, that brings us to a state of Yira. Why is it necessary? Why is the emphasis over here that you need to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah to be able to bring about this Yira Ilah? So he says, I knew Shebezman the Rosh Hashanah tzad atzmei meir begilu haroimus the erin sof shalom ma'alam ma'ilmus. In the time of Rosh Hashanah, its own shines in a revealed way the exaltedness of the infinite light of Hashem that's beyond the worlds. So if it's already shining at that time, so what need is there for us to do something specific to blow the shofar? It's already a gilui of Malchusi Yisbarach that will bring us to Yirei Ilah. So the Rebbe explains, Kisman, top of the next page. Time is part of the limitations and the definitions of the world. Therefore, the exaltedness of the infinite light of Hashem that becomes revealed on Rosh Hashanah. Mitzad Hazman the Rosh Hashanah, because of the time of Rosh Hashanah, because it's a time of the year when the Eibishter's glory is revealed. So therefore, Hushayach la'olamis, it is connected with the worlds. It's something that's associated with the worlds already, because since it's brought about by time, so this is something that time is part of the world. So it's still something that has to do with the revelations of the world. And the revelation of the infinite light of Hashem, the way it's holy and removed from the world, that we want to come to bring down the true level of the Ein Sof, the way it's completely exalted, completely removed from the world. That's primarily through mitzvahs, Asher Kiddishanu, and mitzvahs of that He made us holy through His mitzvahs. That's the idea of what he's explaining. What's the meaning of the bracha? He made us holy through His mitzvahs. Holiness is something that's removed. So the level of holiness that's removed and beyond the worlds, that is something that comes about in the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah, not so much in the time of Rosh Hashanah. Since the blowing of the shofar Rosh Hashanah is a mitzvah, therefore the awe and the trembling from the sound of the shofar Rosh Hashanah is a total awe and complete bittul yira ilah. Why? Because it's coming from a level that completely transcends the world, as opposed to the yira and bittul that just comes because it's the time of Rosh Hashanah. According to this, we could add another explanation. There's the awe that comes about, and from the sound of the shofar of Elul, it's only a lower level of awe. So we were explaining before that the king is in the field, and here the king is in his royal chambers. That's why in the field it's only a lower awe, and the royal chambers it's a yira ilah. But now, based on what we just now said, that it's not just the presence in the royal chambers, it's not just the time of Rosh Hashanah, but it's more than that. It's the very mitzvah that we do on Rosh Hashanah, so we get a deeper insight into this distinction. Because the fact that the sound of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah brings to such an awesome type of awe, bittul b'mitzias, completely nullified his existence, yirei ilah, a higher level of awe. Umitzad mitzvah that tkiyas shofar, it's because tkiyas shofar is a mitzvah, like we said, because only the time of Rosh Hashanah is not enough to be able to bring down this great revelation of Hashem's exaltedness, to bring us to this yirei ilah. The chiyuv tkiyas shofar ba'el ain't a mitzvah, since the blowing of the shofar in El is not a mitzvah. We see that even a mitzvah that Rabbanan, we're going to make a bracha and say Asher Kidshanu Mitzvaysav Yitzivanu. In Elul, even though it's a minhag to blow shofar, but we don't make a bracha on it, because as much as it's a minhag, it's still not a mitzvah. We do not make Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvayis v'tivanu on blowing shofar and El. Therefore, since it's not a mitzvah, it lacks that Asher Kiddushanu, that level of the Kiddusha that's above and beyond. Therefore, the on bit results from the sound of the shofar in the month of El is only a bit layesh, yiratata, the lower awe. Yet, the Rebbe says, despite the fact that it's a lower level of awe, it still has significance in prepping and getting us ready for a higher level of Yira. Al-Sha'afal became, despite the fact that the Yira of El is, and the way how the Yira comes about in Elul is in a way of a lower level of awe, lower level of Yira. Yira zu yakdam of achana, the Yira love the Rosh Hashanah. This awe is a preparation and it's an introduction to the higher awe of Rosh Hashanah. How come? Because, like we said before, because it's necessary to go through the steps. To be able to reach the higher level of Yira, you need to first have the lower level of Yira. And that's why it's necessary, it's not just enough to have the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. It's necessary to have the blowing of the shofar in El, which is Yirat Atah, because before a person reaches the level of Yirei Ilah of Rosh Hashanah, with all the great levels of Hashem's exaltedness, Nasher Kiddushanu, Mitzvayis V'Tzivanu, and so on, we can't just jump into it. We need to do the avodah that's necessary for it. The avodah that's necessary is what I am doing in the Yirat Atah in the month of El that leads me into that when I blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it'll bring me to a level of Yirei Ilah. Any questions before we go on? Let's continue on the bottom of page Yud, Eis Hey, line 22. It's known, how does the progression take place? Now that we established that we must have this progression, to be able to reach this level of Yirei Ilah and Rosh Hashanah, we need to first preface it with the Yirat Atah of El, but it's not a direct thing. It doesn't go directly from Yirat Atah to Yirei Ilah. There is something in the interim. First, there has to be the level of love. From Yirat Atah to Yirei Ilah, in between, there needs to be the avodah of love. The Seder avodah, who the order of a person's service is the chilu rechimu, awe, love, rechimu udechilu, and love and awe. The chilu harishon, the first awe, who Yirat Atah, is the lower level of awe that we've been talking about in the month of El. And following that, there are two levels in love. These two levels of love are known by the terms Avazuta, the minor love, Avarabba, and the great love. And following this, there's the Chilu, there's the final awe, Yirei Ilah, the higher level of awe that we identified with the shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah. Moving from this understood, the Zeshema Yirat Atah the El. Boim L'Yirah Allah B'Rosh Hashanah, top of page Yud Aleph, the fact that from the lower awe in the month of El, we come to the higher awe. On Rosh Hashanah, Wa'idei Hakdamas Ha'ava, it's through being prefaced by love. It needs to have love in between those two levels. We can explain this according to what's written in Likutei Torah. That when the king is in the field, so then he greets everybody with a beautiful face, and he shows a laughing face, a smiling countenance to everybody. The ponim yafes uponim soichkes hu inyan ha'ava. These two ideas, the demeanor of the king, that's in a very enjoyable way, in a laughing way, in a smiling way, all of these are connected with the idea of love. Through the fact that the king receives everybody with this beautiful face. And even more so, specifically, through showing a smiling and laughing countenance to everybody. This inspires by the people that are coming to greet the king in the field. Kamayim upon him, like the waters reflect the face back to the face, that whatever image you show in the waters, the same image is reflected back to you. So too, it says, is the way, the Mishlei says, is the way a person's heart reacts to another person. So when the Eibishter shows us this smiling face and this laughing countenance and so on, this causes and evokes by us Aval HaMelech, a love to the king. So now the Rebbe is going to bring this in to what we're now talking about from the Yira Tata of Elul. We are coming to the Yira Ilah of Rosh Hashanah via the love. So he says in line 9, according to this, we could explain and the details of the Mashal and Likutei Torah. Merumazim arba inyanim haniskarim la'el. In other words, the details of the whole mashal of the king goes out into the field and we greet him, and then he shows us a smiling face, and we follow into all these things. They actually correspond to 4 things: Yira Tata, minor love, the major love, Avarabba, and then the Yira Ilah. So how do we see this? The fact that we're going out to greet the king when he's in the field, we don't have yet a connection with him. Why do we go with him? Because this is just Kabbalah soil. It's the lower level of awe. I have an awe for the king. I have a respect for the king. The king is coming in my neighborhood. The king is coming out to the field. So I'm going to go greet him. Following the us having the Yira Tata going out to greet the king, the king greets them and receives them in a beautiful face, and he shows them a laughing face. These 2 things, the Ponim Yafis and the Mara Ponim Soichakos, these are 2 levels, Shtei Hadargas to Rechimu. They are 2 levels of Rechimu. Ponim Yafis Avazuta. The minor face, the beautiful face, it's not yet laughter, it's just a nice, pleasant face. He's not angry, he's not upset, it's just a nice mood. That is a minor love. And that the reaction is the Kemaim upon him is a minor love. Upon him Soichikos, and the laughing countenance, Avarabba, the laughter, that shows even greater enjoyment and love that the king has for us. So this evokes by us a great love. And following that, there is the idea that the king comes to his royal palace, which is the end of the mashal the Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah. He doesn't just say, okay, the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah is trying to explain the king being in the field. He's trying to explain why in El there are weekdays if the Yud Gimel Rachman shines in the month of El. Why is it necessary to talk about later? But still in all, the Alter Rebbe concludes the mashal in saying, and afterwards, when the king goes into his royal palace, everybody follows him in. Why? Because by bringing this latter part of the mashal, he brings in the idea also of Yira Ilah as well, to tell us that there is this higher level of awe as well. Ois Vav, line 18. Though in the levels of awe, the awe of Elul is below the awe of Rosh Hashanah. That the awe and the fear of Elul is the lower level of Yira. The Yira of Rosh Hashanah is the higher level of Yira. But the Rebbe is never happy with just leaving things as they are. We just explained beautifully how from Elul you come to Tishrei, how from Yira Tata it's a preface to Yira Ilah, the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, the shofar of Elul, and everything is a nice, orderly fashion, one by one. The Rebbe is not happy with that. You can't just have and go away and say Elul is not the ultimate. The Rebbe always wants whatever period of time we're in, that's the highest thing. That has something that no other time has. Don't go ahead and say, well, Rosh Hashanah is the great thing. Elul is just an introduction. The Rebbe is going to show how there's something in Elul which even Rosh Hashanah doesn't have. It says Mikol Mokim says in line 21, still in all Yeshmaila by Yira de Elul Yira de Rosh Hashanah, there's an advantage and quality in the awe of Elul over the awe of Rosh Hashanah. Ki Yira va bitl sheba Rosh Hashanah, the awe and the bitl of Rosh Hashanah. Kivin sha'oz huzman is Gals Malchusi is Baruch. Since during Rosh Hashanah, the time when it's designated for the king to become, to his kingship to become revealed. Therefore, hayira va'bittul oz einam chiddush. The awe and the bittul that I have then is not a novel thing. It's not some great accomplishment. The kivin shakula kamei kalach shiv, because since everything before him is insignificant. The more we are before him, the more we are in his presence, the closer we are to him, the more we are as nothing. Like the Alter Rebbe says in the Igeres HaKodesh Katointi, which we learned not too long ago in Chitas, that the more I have a revelation of the closeness of Hashem, the more that brings me to a state of bittul. The fact that Yidden are in a state of a bittul of the higher level of Yira in the time of Rosh Hashanah. When they are found in the royal palace, this is not something novel, not something extraordinary. So it's like it's to be expected. It's the normal thing because we're in the king's presence then. As for example, the bittul of Atzilus as opposed to the bittul in the lower worlds. It says in the top of Yud Beis, the bittul in Atzilus, even though it's a much higher bittul than the worlds beneath Atzilus, but there's no big deal about it, there's no chiddush, it's not something novel and unique and exceptional. Since in Atzilus it shines a revelation of the infinite light of Hashem, which doesn't shine in the lower worlds, so it's normal to be expected in Atzilus it'll be such a high level of bittul and metzias. In similar to this, there are differences in the bittul of Atzilus itself. The bittul of the sphere of Chachma, that in Chachma is the primary level of bittul. That's why Chachma is known as Koyachma. It's a power of what? It's a power that indicates the idea of bittul. So it's again, Einei Chiddush. It's not such a novel and unique thing that in Chachma there is going to be bittul. So he says, the Fisha Chachma who Agilu the Hula Vadaveins Allah Sayyid Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the famous Haggah in Perek Lamed Hey, he says that in Chachma appreciates and relates to the fact that there is nothing besides Hashem, everything is Hashem. So why wouldn't Chachma be in a state of bittul greater even than Bina or Midas or Malchus? It has this type of appreciation and closeness to the Ohr Sof that's not felt by any of the other spheres. So the fact that Chachma has bittul, even though the bittul of Chachma is the most highest level of bittul in Atzilus itself, it's not a big deal. It's not such a great accomplishment for Chachma to have this. And how much more so that Keser's type of bittul, which is an even higher level of bittul than the bittul of Chachma, it's for sure not a chiddush. That he says, the Afagavshu Ertzach V'chol it says about Keser that even though it is a very pure, very fine light, meaning it's a very, very high revelation, it's still dark in comparison to the cause of causes. What does this idea of darkness mean? The Pirish Ukum Hu Shah Keser B'Bitl. The meaning of being called dark is that Keser is in a state of Bitl. Like for example, an image of something that is black always looks lower, it's more recessed than white. When you look at the color white and black next to each other, white stands out. There's a whole Rashi in about Mitzoida that speaks about it, the white and the dark part of the skins in the signs. So he says it's considered dark because it's no way of recessed. It's bittul. Lagaba Ohr Sof Shalamaylam Keser in comparison to the infinite light of Hashem is beyond Keser, which is Ilos HaIlos, the Ohr Sof that's higher than Keser, is the cause of causes. Keser is the Ilah for Atzilus in all the worlds. Ein Sof is ilas ha'ilas, the cause of causes. So Keser has this level of ultimate bittul in comparison to the Ein Sof. So, again, it has an amazing bittul. It's higher than all the world's bittul. It's higher than the bittul of Chachma. But there's nothing to get overly excited from that bittul. It's not a big chiddush. She'ein's a chiddush. This is not something unique. Since Keser comprehends and grasps the fact that he is incomparable to the Ein Sof. Now let's compare that back. This is all in the brackets. We were talking about this was all an example of the bittul on Rosh Hashanah. When a person is in the royal palace, so it's a given that he's going to be in a state of bittul. You enter the royal palace, you see all the designs and the royalty and the honor that the king is being given. He's dressed in the royal garb and so on. The same thing on Rosh Hashanah, you're overwhelmed by all the great revelations of Rosh Hashanah, so of course you're going to have a bittul for the king. It's a higher bittul than El, but it didn't come through my work and through my effort. So he says in line 12, Vayirav bittul be'el, the awe and the bittul of El. Sha'melchu b'sada, when the king is in the field. Sha'oz ein nirgish hagadlos v'areim mishaloi. When the king is in the field, it's not felt his greatness and his exaltedness. Va'afal pikein yeshna bittul Yisrael. Still in all there is the bittul of the Yidden. Shemakavlim aleim malchus yizbarach, that they accept upon themselves his kingship. V'loi oid. It's not just enough that they have the Kabbalah's oil in El. It's not just enough that they have the Yira Tata, but they actually do something to awaken within them. They blow the shofar to awaken within them the Yira and Charada, the trembling. Why? Why is it insufficient just to greet the king? Because they wanted to be as thorough as possible, because they wanted to have that the acceptance of the kingship should be in the ultimate way. So because of that, they do everything possible to bring themselves to the awe. In the bittul, so this bittul, afshu bittul hayesh, though it's only bittul hayesh, it's a lower state of bittul. It's not the powerful bittul of Rosh Hashanah, the bittul b'metzias, the Yirei Elam. It is very precious in Hashem's eyes. The bittul of El is more precious than the bittul of Rosh Hashanah, because this is our own doing, this is our own avodah. We could say, through the delight and enjoyment of the king, from the fact that we're going out towards him to greet him, Kabbalah's Malchus Yisbarach, which we said, this is the acceptance of his kingship, by the fact that we go out into the field to greet him. While he's in the field, he doesn't look so amazing, he doesn't look so awesome. The very nature that he's so accepting and he's smiling and he's laughing, all these things are evoked much deeper when he sees how we are going on our own, how we are interested in greeting him. Yes, when we could add that this advantage that we just now said, that the awe and bittul of El over the awe and bittul of Rosh Hashanah, it's not just because it's novel, it's unique, and on Rosh Hashanah, what's the big deal? Of course, we're going to be all in awe. Though we said before that the quality of the bittul of Rosh Hashanah is a higher quality bittul, it's bittul of Metzias, and the bittul of El is bittul hayesh, so seemingly, but the quality of the bittul is less. So he says there's still, in the bittul, there's something about the bittul of El that's greater than the bittul of Rosh Hashanah. So he says, "Va'bittul shal yidei gilui," top of page Gimel. The bittul that comes about because of a revelation from above, like on Rosh Hashanah. Kivin shal bittul u'mnei makir u'margish ha'ilui dahagilui. Since the bittul is because he recognizes and he senses the great revelation, the greatness of the revelation, how it's incomparable to him. So the bittul is connected with the person's being. It's my recognition. The bittul is a result of my understanding. So I, the ego, the person, is involved in the bittul. And the true type of bittul is the avoid of the kabbalas oil and the avoid of accepting the yoke of heaven. Then he's like a servant. Because of the yoke of the master that's laying upon him. It's necessary for him to fulfill the will of the master. It's not at all about himself. The Rebbe says a similar idea about Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis by Matan Torah, that this was to evoke this idea of bittul that's totally beyond the person's own recognition. It should be a bittul that comes from above and outside.